I still remember those mysterious whispers, those covert smiles he thought I was oblivious to. His sudden and secret so-called cabin trips with the boys were more frequent and enigmatic. For a long time, trust was a bridge we both built, and I never thought he would be the one to burn it. The day I decided to surprise him, the shock was mine to embrace, and the scene before me was anything but anticipated. In this narration, I share a transformative journey from being a deceived spouse to discovering strength and resilience I never knew resided within me. This story is not just a tale of betrayal and revenge, but it's about metamorphosis, redemption, learning to love oneself, and finding strength in the darkest of times. But remember, it's not just a tale of revenge. It's a story that transcends beyond the usual norms, breaking the stereotypes of vengeance and reaching a state of liberation, acceptance, and empowerment. My name is Camilla, and this is my story. So there I was, casually sipping my morning coffee, browsing through old photos of us, hubby and me, laughing, kissing, being the embodiment of a picture-perfect marriage. It had been 5 blissful years, but something was off lately. Every few weekends, my husband would gather his bags and vanish into the wilderness with his gang of friends, or the boys, as he affectionately called them, leaving me to wonder what mysterious adventures they were off to. His tales of these secretive escapades were riddled with inconsistencies. He'd say they were fishing, but there would be no pictures of fish. He'd say they were camping, but there'd be no photos of tents. Must be a guy thing, I would say to myself, pushing aside the nagging doubt and the nagging feeling that something was amiss. Curiosity is a potent brew, and eventually, I caved. I decided to surprise him on one of his secret cabin trips. My heart raced with anticipation as I drove through winding roads, surrounded by dense, whispering trees, to the secluded cabin where they supposedly hung out. I hope he's happy to see me, I muttered to myself, my hands clammy on the wheel. As I reached, the sight before me made my heart sink into my stomach. There was my husband, but there were no boys. Instead, there she was, a woman, her laughter harmonizing with his in a symphony of betrayal. Rage bubbled inside me as I watched them, unseen. But rather than confront them, an idea hatched inside my head. A spectacular, dramatic, grandiose display of revenge, seasoned with a sprinkle of public humiliation. I started my meticulous plan by gathering evidence. I clicked photographs, collected voice recordings, snippets of their stolen moments together. Each piece of evidence was a sharp sting, a reminder of the facade of my marriage. I kept telling myself, focus, this is for the grand revelation. This will be worth it. With all the evidence I needed, it was time to set the stage. I decided to throw a grand party, a soiree to celebrate love and commitment. My invitations were extended to all our friends, family, and acquaintances, and there was a peculiar emphasis on the boys to make sure they attend. My heart pounded as I prepared, knowing that the mask of perfection would soon be shattered. To my delight, the party was buzzing. The air was saturated with laughter and chatter, everyone blissfully ignorant of the drama that was about to unfold. My husband, basking in the love and attention showered upon him, was completely oblivious to the storm brewing around him. With every passing second, my heart raced, but I kept my composure. I smiled. I laughed. I played the gracious host, waiting for the perfect moment to drop my bombshell. And then it arrived, the moment when everyone was gathered, their attention fixated on us, as we were about to make a toast. I raised my glass high, my voice steady, to love, and to the beautiful secrets it holds. With a smirk, I started the projection. The room fell into stunned silence as images flashed across the screen, the laughter and whispers of stolen moments echoing around the room. The air was charged with shock, betrayal, and whispered accusations. I watched as the color drained from my husband's face, his eyes darting around, looking for an escape from the web of his own making. The room was a battlefield, and I was the lone warrior, standing tall amidst the ruins of my marriage, victorious yet broken. I had pulled off my grand revenge. The public humiliation etched on his face was the trophy I hadn't known I wanted. But there was no joy in this victory, only the cold, empty realization that the man I had loved was never truly mine. And while the whispers and the stares surrounded me, the only sound that echoed in my mind was the shattering of my own heart. The fallout from my dramatic revelation was like a slow burning fire, consuming everything in its path. My husband, or should I say soon-to-be ex-husband, was now the subject of hushed whispers and furtive glances, his reputation in tatters. The next day, he tried to approach me, his eyes swollen, probably from remorse, or perhaps just from being caught. "Please, can we talk about this?" he pleaded, his voice a fragile whisper. "I have nothing to say to you," I replied coldly, my heart stone against his pleas. But my mind was a whirlwind of emotions, torn between the remnants of love and the fresh wounds of betrayal. Every fiber of my being screamed to run away, to escape the ruins of my once happy life. But no, I wasn't done. The dramatic revelation was just the appetizer. The main course of revenge was still being served. In my pursuit of revenge, I found unlikely allies. The boys, feeling betrayed themselves, were more than willing to assist me in my mission. We colluded, planned, and executed meticulous schemes to expose his lies further, to tarnish his image and isolate him from everyone who once admired him. We worked in shadows, our moves calculated, our intentions clear. Our little revenge squad was a ticking time bomb, and it exploded, revealing more secrets, more betrayals. It seemed my husband had created a labyrinth of lies, a maze so complex that even he was lost in it. The more I discovered, the more my heart hardened. The slivers of love that remained were now turning into shards of hate. And then there was her, the other woman, the partner in his deceit. My anger towards her was a raging inferno, but I also saw her as a pawn in his twisted game, another victim of his lies. I approached her, my intentions unclear even to myself. Was it to confront her, to understand her, or to simply see the face of the woman who had stolen my husband's heart? Her eyes met mine, a flicker of guilt passing through them before being replaced by defiance. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice laced with a mixture of fear and defiance. "I want to know why," was all I could muster, my voice a mere whisper, the pain and anger battling within me. She, too, had been a puppet in his game, unaware of his marital status, fed lies coated in sweet words. It became clear that in his quest for thrill and adventure, he had played us both, leaving a trail of broken hearts in his wake. The revelation sparked a strange camaraderie between us, two broken souls united by betrayal. We exchanged stories, tears, and mutual regrets, the pain forging an unspoken bond between us. It was a connection neither of us had sought, but there we were, confiding, understanding, healing. As I listened to her, my rage simmered into a cold, calculated resolve. This was not just my battle anymore. It was our battle, a war against deceit and betrayal. We became partners in revenge, planning the final act of this drama, the grand finale where he would be stripped of his masks, his true face revealed to the world. As the day of reckoning approached, my newfound ally and I met in secret, refining our plan and sharing our vulnerabilities. Our bond was strange, but it was real, forged in the fires of betrayal. We were two wounded warriors, fighting a common enemy, our pain our strongest weapon. Finally, the day arrived. The stage was set, and all the actors were in their places. The air was thick with tension, charged with anticipation. I felt a kaleidoscope of emotions as I prepared to face him, my stomach in knots, my heart racing. This is it, the moment of truth, I said to myself, steadying my breath, preparing for the storm ahead. We had planned a public confrontation, a spectacular showdown where all his lies would be laid bare, his charade exposed. We had invited friends, family, colleagues, anyone who had known him, respected him. It was to be a court of public opinion, a platform where his true self would be revealed. He walked in, unsuspecting, his usual charm in place, his smile radiating confidence. He had no idea that his fortress of lies was about to crumble, his empire of deceit about to fall. My heart hammered in my chest as he approached, his eyes searching mine, a flicker of curiosity in them. "What is all this?" he asked, the innocence in his voice almost convincing. And then the storm broke, a torrent of accusations, revelations, and confessions pouring down on him. His face changed, the mask slipping, revealing the man behind it, the real him. The room was a battlefield, his defenders fighting a losing battle, the truth slicing through their defenses, exposing the rot within. His eyes darted around, looking for an escape, a way out of this nightmare. But there was none. The walls were closing in, his past catching up to him. The air was electric, the tension palpable, the silence broken only by the whispers of shock and disbelief. It was a spectacle, a display of his true self, each layer peeled back, revealing the man he really was. His charm, his charisma, all stripped away, leaving behind a broken, defeated man. The room was a sea of faces, each one a mirror reflecting his betrayal, his deceit. I watched him, my heart a mix of satisfaction and sorrow, the final act playing out before my eyes. I had dreamed of this moment, longed for it, the sweet taste of revenge on my lips. But as I saw him there, broken, lost, a part of me mourned the man I had loved, the man I had thought he was. He tried to speak, to defend himself, to explain, but his words were empty, his voice a hollow echo. The truth was out, the mask shattered, and all that remained was the man, the real man, exposed and vulnerable. His eyes met mine, a plea in them, a silent request for forgiveness, understanding. But it was too late. The damage was done, and all that remained was the ruins of a life, a love, destroyed by his own hands. The confrontation was a catharsis, a release of all the pain, the anger, the betrayal. It was a cleansing, a purification, the truth washing away the stains of his lies. And as the dust settled, as the echoes of the confrontation faded, I felt a sense of peace, a calmness I hadn't felt in a long time. As I walked away from the ruins of my past, a sense of freedom enveloped me, a lightness in my step. I had fought the battle, won the war, and now the future was mine to shape, to mold. The pain was still there, the scars still fresh, but I was healing, growing, evolving. I looked back one last time at the man I had loved, the man I had lost. He was a shadow, a ghost of his former self, his world crumbled, his life in shambles. It was a painful sight, a reminder of what could have been, what should have been. But it was also a symbol of my strength, my resilience, my ability to rise from the ashes, to rebuild, to renew. And with a final glance, a final goodbye, I turned away, leaving the past behind, stepping into the future, a future of possibilities, of hope, of new beginnings. The aftermath of the confrontation was a maelstrom of emotions, a tempest of pain and relief, regret and vindication. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but the echo of betrayal still reverberated in the back of my mind. "You've done it. You've exposed him," I said to myself, trying to grasp the enormity of what had just transpired. He was now the talk of the town, whispers of his deceitful exploits permeating through every social circle. His name was synonymous with betrayal, his image tarnished beyond repair. It was the bitter fruit of his deception, a consequence of his actions, and it tasted oh so sweet to my revenge-fueled heart. Our shared acquaintances were divided, some siding with him, ensnared in his web of charming lies, while others extended their sympathy to me, their eyes newly opened to his true colors. It was a war of opinions, a battlefield of conflicting loyalties, and I was at its center, a symbol of his deceit and downfall. The other woman, once my opponent, now my ally, also began her journey of healing. Our bond, though born of pain and betrayal, had become a beacon of support and understanding, a shared experience that only we could truly comprehend. We were the wounded survivors of his emotional onslaught, and together we started to rebuild our broken selves. During this turbulent time, my newfound strength became my guiding light, my compass through the storm. I immersed myself in activities that brought me joy, surrounded myself with people who loved and supported me. This is your time, your moment to rediscover yourself, I constantly reminded myself. Every day was a battle, a struggle to move past the pain, to let go of the bitterness. There were moments of weakness, moments where the shadows of the past threatened to engulf me, but I fought back, clung to the light, to the hope of a better tomorrow. The path was rocky, the journey long, but I persevered, my resolve unbroken. I indulged in self-care, explored new hobbies, met new people, opened my heart to new experiences. I learned to love myself, to value my worth, to see beyond the scars, beyond the pain. It was a journey of self-discovery, of growth, of transformation. I was a phoenix, rising from the ashes, reborn in the fire of my trials. However, the shadow of him lingered, a ghost haunting my steps, his memory a constant reminder of the pain, the betrayal. But with each passing day, the shadow grew fainter, the pain less sharp, the memories less vivid. I was healing, slowly, gradually, the wounds closing, the scars fading. In my journey of rebirth, I also learned the power of forgiveness, the strength in letting go. I realized that harboring the bitterness, the anger, was only poisoning my soul, chaining me to the past, to him. To truly be free, to truly move on, you must forgive, a wise friend advised me. It was not easy to release the anger, to let go of the resentment. It was a battle, a struggle within myself, but I fought it. I conquered it. I learned to forgive, not for him, but for me, to free myself from the chains of the past, to cleanse my soul from the toxins of bitterness. It was a release, a liberation, a breath of fresh air. Forgiving him was my final act of revenge, my ultimate victory. It was my way of taking back my power, my control, my life. It was my declaration of independence, my proclamation of freedom. I was no longer his victim, no longer his prisoner. I was free, free to live, to love, to be me. In this newfound freedom, in this rebirth, I found my true self, my authentic self. I learned to embrace my flaws, to celebrate my uniqueness, to love myself unconditionally. I discovered my worth, my value, my essence. I was me, unapologetically, proudly, freely. And as I walked this path of self-discovery, of healing, of growth, I realized that this journey, this experience, had shaped me, molded me into the person I was meant to be. It was a painful lesson, a harsh reality, but it was my truth, my story. And I owned it, embraced it, learned from it. In this climactic juncture of my life, where forgiveness had paved the road to my emancipation from pain, and I was evolving every day, I also had a revelation. What if my true revenge is not just unearthing his deceitful endeavors, but also blooming in the ruins he left me in? I thought. a newfound purpose illuminating my path. I decided to convert my sufferings, my experiences, into stepping stones to help others going through the same agony. It was time to turn the tables, time to metamorphose my pain into power, my sufferings into solace for others. My journey found a voice in the form of a support group where broken hearts met to share, to heal, and to find strength in unity. It was a sanctuary of broken souls, a haven where wounded hearts found solace, understanding, and hope. Every story shared was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a reminder that we were not alone in our pain. Here, amidst tears and laughter, pain and hope, I saw the transformative power of shared experiences, of mutual support, of unconditional love. It was a magical experience, a healing journey, a rediscovery of self-worth, and I was humbled to be a part of it. Every session was a step closer to healing, a move towards self-discovery, a journey towards self-love. It was an emotional roller coaster, a symphony of pain and hope, sorrow and joy, and it was beautiful. I was witnessing the metamorphosis of broken spirits, the rebirth of lost souls, the rediscovery of buried self-love. However, my journey was not without its challenges, its setbacks. There were moments of weakness, of doubt, of despair. There were times when the shadows of the past threatened to engulf me, to pull me back into the abyss of pain. But I fought, I persevered, I overcame. Every challenge faced was a victory won. Every setback overcome was a step forward. I am not defined by my past, by his betrayal. I am defined by my strength, by my resilience, by my ability to rise above the pain, I reminded myself during those trying times. It was my mantra, my shield against the shadows, my beacon in the darkness. In this journey of self-discovery, of healing, of transformation, I also found love, not in another, but in myself. I learned to appreciate my worth, to celebrate my uniqueness, to embrace my flaws. I discovered the beauty in self-love, the power in self-acceptance, the freedom in self-expression. I was not searching for someone to complete me, to fix me, to save me. I was complete, whole, beautiful in my imperfection. I was my savior, my hero, my love. I was enough. In the end, my revenge was not just exposing his deceit, not just surviving his betrayal, but thriving despite it. It was about transforming my pain into power, my suffering into strength, my tears into pearls of wisdom. It was about rising from the ashes, soaring above the pain, embracing my true self. And there he was, shackled by the chains of his deceit, imprisoned in the web of his lies, a prisoner of his own making. He had lost everything, his reputation, his friends, his love, while I had gained everything, my self-worth, my strength, my freedom. My true revenge was my transformation, my evolution, my liberation. It was the realization of my worth, the acceptance of my flaws, the celebration of my uniqueness. It was my journey from victim to survivor, from survivor to warrior, from warrior to victor. In conclusion, revenge is not about causing pain. It's about reclaiming your power. It's not about dwelling in the past. It's about building your future. It's not about him. It's about you.
My name is Helen Collins. I'm 29 years old, and I work at the local library in a small town that most people have probably never heard of. My life is simple, maybe too simple for some, but it's mine. I've always been the quiet type, preferring the company of books to the loud outside world. The library is my sanctuary. It's a small, old building with creaky floors and shelves that have seen better days. But to me, it's perfect. Every day, I open the library doors at 8 a.m., turn on the lights, and breathe in the familiar scent of books. It's a routine that never gets old. My parents passed away when I was young, so I was raised by my grandmother. She was a kind woman, always encouraging me to read and learn. But she's gone now too, and I'm all alone. No siblings, no close relatives, just me and my small world. Good morning, Helen. Mr. Jenkins, a regular visitor, greets me as he walks in. He's an elderly man who spends his days reading history books. Good morning, Mr. Jenkins. The new shipment of history books arrived yesterday. I've set them aside for you. I reply with a smile. Ah, you know me too well, dear. He chuckles, shuffling towards the designated shelf. The day goes on like this, with familiar faces coming and going. I help a group of kids find books for their school project, recommend a romance novel to Mrs. Harrison, and guide Mr. Thompson to the science fiction section. It's a quiet life, but I like it. I find comfort in the predictability, the routine. And then one day, everything changed. The day Jack walked into my life. He came in looking for a book, but I could tell he wasn't the regular library type. He seemed out of place with his crisp suit and confident stride. Can you help me find a book? He asked, his voice smooth and inviting. Of course. What are you looking for? I replied, trying to keep my composure. It's a novel, The Great Gatsby, I believe. Right this way, I said, leading him to the classic section. As I handed him the book, our hands brushed briefly, sending a jolt through me. It was a simple touch, but it lingered in my mind. Thank you, Helen, he said, reading my name tag. I'm Jack. It's nice to meet you, Jack. That brief encounter marked the beginning of everything. The beginning of a love that I thought would last a lifetime. The beginning of a journey that would take me from the quiet life I knew into a world of chaos and betrayal. If only I had known then what I know now, maybe things would have been different. But life doesn't come with a warning label, and sometimes we just have to learn the hard way. After that first meeting, Jack began to visit the library more frequently. It was odd, considering he didn't strike me as the reading type. But every time he came in, he'd ask for a book recommendation and then spend a few minutes chatting with me. One day, he walked in just as I was struggling with a box of newly arrived books. Need a hand with that? He offered, walking over. That would be great, thanks, I said, relieved. As we placed the books on the shelves, he asked, So, Helen, what got you into working at a library? I shrugged. I've always loved books. They're like friends, you know. Plus, it's nice and quiet here. He laughed. I can see that. It's like a whole different world. Our conversations grew longer with each visit. I found out that Jack worked in his family's business, something to do with real estate. He was easy to talk to, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was genuinely interested in me. Then one day, he surprised me. Helen, would you like to have dinner with me tonight? He asked, a hopeful look in his eyes. I was taken aback. Like a date? Yes, like a date, he smiled. I hesitated. This was new territory for me, but there was something about him that made me want to say yes. Okay, sure, I'd like that, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. We went to a small restaurant in town. It wasn't fancy, but it was cozy. We talked about everything and nothing, and for a few hours, I forgot about my usually solitary life. Walking home, Jack said, I had a really great time tonight, Helen. You're very different from the people I usually meet. I didn't know how to respond, so I just smiled. He continued, I'd like to see you again. Would that be okay? I nodded. Yes, I'd like that. From then on, we started seeing each other more regularly. He'd take me out to dinner or we'd go for walks. It was nice. For once, I felt like I was part of something more, part of a world that wasn't just about books and quietness. It wasn't long before I fell for him. Hard. He was charming and attentive, and he made me feel special. And when he proposed, I didn't hesitate. I said yes. Looking back, I wish I had seen the signs. I wish I had known that the charm was just a mask, a cover for something much less pleasant. But love has a way of blinding you, of making you ignore the warning signs. And I was very much in love. Or at least I thought I was. After Jack and I got engaged, things started to change. It began with his parents. They didn't approve of me from the start. They thought I was below their son because I didn't come from money. The first time I met them, it was clear they didn't like me. We were at their house for dinner, and I was nervous. It was a big, fancy house. Nothing like what I was used to. "Helen, this is my mother, Margaret, and my father, Richard," Jack introduced. "Nice to meet you," I said, trying to smile. Margaret looked me up and down. So you're the girl who works at the library." "Yes, I am," I replied, feeling smaller by the second. Richard chimed in. "Jack, couldn't you find someone more suitable?" I felt like crawling into a hole. The dinner was long and uncomfortable. They made it clear they thought I wasn't good enough for their son. But Jack stood up for me, which made me love him even more. Before our wedding, they insisted on a prenuptial agreement. They said it was just a formality. I didn't have much to lose, so I agreed without making a fuss. Once we got married, I moved into Jack's house, which was actually his parents' house. They had given it to him as a wedding gift, but they acted like it was still theirs. His parents came over all the time, unannounced. They'd walk in and start ordering me around. "Helen, make us some coffee," Margaret would demand as soon as she walked in. And I would, without saying anything. I didn't want to cause trouble. One day, Margaret pointed at the TV and said, "Remember, Helen, in case of divorce, you can't claim this." It was like that with everything. They reminded me constantly that everything in the house wasn't mine. Jack started changing too. He wasn't the man I fell in love with. He started joining in on the jokes his parents made about me. One evening, I was trying to decide what to wear for a family event. I asked Jack for his opinion. "This one makes you look less drab," he said, laughing. I was hurt. It was like he was a different person around his parents. He didn't stand up for me anymore. Instead, he laughed along with them. It was exhausting, living in that house. I felt like an outsider, an unwanted guest. I kept hoping things would get better, but they only got worse. The stress got to me. I started having stomach pains, bad ones. I tried to ignore them, but one day I collapsed at the library. I woke up in the hospital. The doctor said it was stress-related. I was in the hospital for a few days. Jack didn't visit. He didn't even call. I felt so alone. Then, one day, a notary came to my room. He had news. My great-aunt, someone I barely remembered, had passed away, and she had left me her fortune, $30 million. I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know what to do with that kind of money, but suddenly, I wasn't just the poor girl from the library anymore. When Jack and his parents found out, they came to visit. Suddenly, they were all smiles and sweetness. "Darling, we're so happy for you," Margaret said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Yes, we're a family. We should support each other," Richard added. I didn't buy it. It was too much of a change. After they left, I overheard them talking outside my room. They didn't know I was listening. "She's such a fool. Can you believe our luck?" Jack laughed. "We need to make sure she doesn't leave you, Jack. Maybe you should have a child with her." "That will tie her down," Margaret suggested. I felt sick to my stomach. These people didn't care about me. They just wanted my money. I knew then what I had to do. I had to get out of that house, away from these people. I had to take control of my life. I wasn't going to be their victim anymore. I left the hospital with a plan in my mind. I knew what I had to do. As I got home, Jack and his parents were waiting. They were all smiles, acting like the caring family they never were. "Oh, Helen, we were so worried about you," Margaret exclaimed. I nodded but didn't say much. I needed to act normal, not to tip them off. Jack came closer. "So, when do you get the inheritance?" he asked, a little too eagerly. I looked at him, the man I thought I loved, and realized I didn't even recognize him anymore. "Soon," I said. But it's not something you need to worry about. His smile faltered a bit. But we're married, Helen. What's yours is mine, right? I forced a smile. Of course, darling. That night, I couldn't sleep. Their voices echoed in my head, their fake concern, their greed. It made me sick. I got up and started writing. I wrote down everything they had done, everything they had said. It was like a dam had broken, and years of pent-up frustration and pain poured out. The next morning, I had a meeting with a lawyer. I explained everything, showed him the prenuptial agreement. He was shocked but said the agreement would protect me. "You're doing the right thing," he assured me. When I got back, I found Jack and his parents in the living room. They looked up as I walked in. "There she is, our brave girl," Richard said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I sat down, clutching my purse. "I have something to say." They all looked at me, curious. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice steady. The room went silent. Then Margaret erupted. "What? You ungrateful little—" Jack was on his feet. "Helen, you can't be serious. We love you." "Do you, Jack?" "Because I don't feel loved. I feel used." Margaret was fuming. "We'll sue you. We'll take half of your inheritance." I reached into my purse and pulled out a copy of the prenuptial agreement. "Actually, you can't. This says neither of us can claim the other's property in case of divorce." They were speechless. For the first time, I felt in control. I stood up. "I'm leaving. I don't want any of you to contact me." I walked out of that house, their shouts and insults trailing behind me. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But as I drove away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was free from their disdain, their manipulation. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew it had to be better than the past. I rented a small apartment in the city. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I was still dealing with the divorce, but I felt like I could handle it. One day, I got a call from the lawyer. "Helen, there's something you should know about your great-aunt's will." I was puzzled. "What about it?" "There's a condition. You need to use a portion of your inheritance for a charitable cause. It was your great-aunt's final wish." I was surprised. I had no idea. The lawyer continued. "She was quite the philanthropist. It seems she wanted to pass that on to you." I hung up the phone, deep in thought. My great-aunt had given me a chance to do something good. It felt like a sign, a push in a new direction. I started researching charities and causes. I wanted to do something meaningful, something that would make a difference. That's when I stumbled upon a small organization that helped women who were victims of domestic abuse. It struck a chord with me. I contacted them and set up a meeting. The woman I met, Linda, was passionate and dedicated. "We provide shelter, legal aid, and counseling to women who have nowhere else to go," Linda explained. I listened, moved by the stories she shared. "I want to help," I said, feeling a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. With Linda's guidance, I used a part of the inheritance to fund a new shelter. It was an incredible feeling, knowing I was helping other women find a way out, just like I had. A few weeks later, Linda invited me to the opening of the shelter. It was a small event, but the atmosphere was full of hope and gratitude. As people mingled, I noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was Sarah, an old colleague from the library. "Helen, is that you?" she asked, surprised. "Sarah, it's been so long," I said, hugging her. "What are you doing here?" she asked. I told her about the shelter, about my involvement. She listened, her eyes wide. "That's incredible, Helen. I had no idea." "It's a new chapter for me," I said, smiling. We spent the evening catching up. It felt good to reconnect with an old friend. It felt like pieces of my life were slowly falling back into place. As the event wrapped up, Linda came over. "Helen, I can't thank you enough. This shelter will change lives." I looked around at the faces of the women who now had a safe place to go. It's the least I could do, I said, feeling a warmth in my heart that I hadn't felt in a very long time. The days started to blend into one another, each filled with the rewarding work at the shelter. I was finding a new sense of purpose, something that was truly mine. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. It was a number I hadn't seen in a while, Jack's. My heart raced with a mixture of emotions, but curiosity won. "Hello, Jack," I said, my voice calm. "Helen, I need to talk to you. Can we meet? It's urgent." His voice sounded desperate. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet him at a public coffee shop, hoping that being in a familiar place would give me strength. Sitting across from Jack, he looked different, defeated, almost pitiful. His eyes were pleading. "Helen, I made a huge mistake. I want you back. I've realized how much you mean to me," he blurted out. I looked at him, feeling nothing but contempt. "Why now, Jack?" He sighed. "My parents, they controlled everything. They were the reason our marriage failed. I was weak, but I'm different now." I felt a surge of anger. "You blame your parents? You stood by while they treated me like dirt. You laughed with them, Jack." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Please, Helen, I know I was wrong. I've changed." I stared at him, seeing the man I once loved but now felt nothing for. "Changed or not, it's too late. I feel nothing for you, Jack. Nothing but contempt." His face fell, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I married. But it was fleeting. "I'm sorry, Jack. I've moved on. I have a life now, a purpose. There's no place for you in it," I said firmly. He nodded slowly, a look of resignation on his face. "I understand. I just had to try." Leaving the coffee shop, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was over. Truly over. The next day, there was an event at the shelter. A local artist had donated a sculpture, and it was to be unveiled in the garden. As I stood there, surrounded by people who supported and believed in me, I felt a sense of belonging. Sarah, my old colleague from the library, stood beside me. "You've done something amazing here, Helen," she said, smiling. The artist pulled the cover off the sculpture, revealing a figure of a woman reaching up to the sky. It symbolized hope, strength, and new beginnings. Applause filled the air, and for a moment, everything felt right in the world. Linda, the woman who had helped me so much, came over. "Helen, this is just the beginning. There's so much more we can do." I looked around at the faces filled with hope and knew she was right. This was my new beginning, and I was ready to embrace it fully. My new life was busy and fulfilling. Every day at the shelter brought new challenges and rewards. My confidence grew, and for the first time in years, I felt in control of my destiny. I even started taking self-defense classes, something I would have never imagined doing before. One day, as I was leaving the shelter, I saw a car parked outside. It was my mother-in-law, Margaret, and she stepped out as soon as she saw me. "Helen, we need to talk," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. "I have nothing to say to you, Margaret," I replied, my voice steady. "Please, just hear me out. I've realized how wrong we were," she pleaded. I stopped and looked at her. She seemed genuine, but I couldn't forget the past. "What do you want, Margaret?" "I want to apologize. I treated you terribly. I've lost my son because of it, and I don't want to lose you, too. You were like the daughter I never had," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. I felt a pang of something. Sympathy, perhaps, but I pushed it away. "Margaret, you made my life a living hell. An apology won't change that. I've moved on, and I suggest you do the same," I said firmly. She reached out to me, but I stepped back. "Please, Helen, I know I can't undo the past, but I want to make things right." I shook my head. "It's too late for that. Goodbye, Margaret." As I walked away, I felt her gaze on my back, but I didn't look back. I had learned to stand up for myself, and there was no going back to the way things were. The next day, I received a letter from Jack's lawyer. He was contesting the divorce settlement. I wasn't surprised, but I was ready. I met with my lawyer, a sharp woman named Rachel. "He's got no leg to stand on, Helen. The prenuptial agreement is clear. He's just trying to intimidate you," she said confidently. I nodded. "I'm not afraid of him anymore. Let's fight this." The court date arrived, and I walked in with my head held high. Jack was there with his lawyer, and for a moment, our eyes met. There was a flash of the old Jack, the one I had loved, but it vanished quickly. The judge listened to both sides and then made her decision. The prenuptial agreement stood, and Jack's claims were dismissed. I felt a surge of relief and triumph. After the court session, Jack approached me. "Helen, I'm sorry. I was wrong," he said, his voice low. I looked at him, seeing the man I once loved, but now felt nothing for. "Goodbye, Jack. Take care of yourself," I said, and walked away. As I left the courtroom, I felt a sense of closure. That chapter of my life was finally over, and a new one was just beginning. At the shelter, we were planning a fundraiser, and it was taking all my attention. The support from the community was overwhelming, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude. The night of the fundraiser arrived, and the place was buzzing with energy. People from all walks of life had come to support our cause. As I looked around, I realized how far I had come. From a quiet, timid woman to someone who stood up for herself and others. "Helen, you did it. This is amazing," Sarah said, coming up to me. I smiled. We did it. And there's so much more to do. As the event went on, I felt a sense of accomplishment and purpose. This was my life now, and I was exactly where I was meant to be.